Nikki D from Five Dog Farm, and I thought after the first success of our first garden, I would talk this season about what we're planting and why. One of the big surprises and successes that I had never planted before was squash. We planted 3 varieties and they all came up really well. We planted Black Beauty squash, we planted yellow crookneck, and we planted candy squash. Now, candy squash was something I had never heard of. I was looking through Southern Living magazine, which I devour every month it comes in. I love that magazine, and saw an article on candy squash and it being a southern plant. So I asked a friend of mine, Serena, my bestie, have you ever heard of this? Because she's from the South. And she said, as a matter of fact, I have seeds. So I was so excited. She got me some seeds, and they are not tiny, they are large. And based off the article and her recommendations, I was really excited about putting this plant into our garden. So I planted it a little late. It should be planted typical of squash, April, May, depending on your zone. We're in zone 6. But I direct sowed it about June or July, I believe. I planted 3 of the seeds. Again, not sure what to expect, and 2 out of the 3 came up. Now, I planted them not in our raised bed where we've been doing our homemade composting and mulching and all kinds of things. I planted it in the new row garden we had that basically was me digging holes every so far after I had put down landscape fabric, cut a hole in it, put a little bit of our compost in it, and stuck a seed in it. that was the extent of my row garden planting. Fingers crossed. As a vining plant, I knew that I would need to give it some support, and Serena had warned me it does get big. I did not realize what big meant. So I did have a cattle panel up, and thank goodness, because this is about an, I guess, average size. We had a couple maybe smaller, maybe about yay big, and we had quite a few, no kidding, bigger. I mean, and it's heavy. Bigger than this. So I was pleasantly surprised about this plant. It was more than I had expected. Literally, by the time I pulled it out, the stems on it were about yay big, about the size of the mason jar lid, that big. It was incredible. It vined on the cattle panel just as it should. Shockingly, these hung on. Now, I tried vining watermelon on well, it wasn't exactly a cattle panel. It was a piece of fencing that I had that I arched and hung it on, but it's the same idea. So that didn't work. The watermelon fell off of that, and it didn't dawn on me until they started growing. I thought, oh no, I had such a bad experience with the watermelon, but the stems on these, this one's missing. The stems on these are as big as my thumb. They hold on, so you can put them on some kind of climbing apparatus, however you do it. We're using cattle panels. Cooking these is a joy. What I do is I just take one of my larger knives and I just cut it lengthwise in half. Scoop out the seeds with a spoon. Couldn't be easier. Remember, they're ginormous, so very easy to get the seeds out. I put them on paper towels and dry them, and then my favorite thing, putting them in a jar after they've completely dried, and then I put my jars in a dark place. Because they're not a dark jar, I don't want the sun to get to the seeds. Some seeds I put in envelopes depending. These were so big, I felt that the jar was the way to go. So that's what I did. So anyway, you have it. What I do is I just put salt and pepper and a little bit of butter, parchment paper, and I roast those suckers, 325. I'm not really a person who times things a lot. When I give a recipe, I actually have to pay attention to what I'm doing so I can give you the recipe and give you times. And when it comes to roasting, I typically just look. My guess would be half hour, 45 minutes, but please just, whenever you roast a root vegetable, you know approximately how long that takes. I have sliced them up and roasted them along with some potatoes and parsnips and other things, you know, like a fall roasted root vegetable medley, delicious. But mostly I have them, roast them as I told you, and then scoop it out and eat it just like that. It is so sweet, so delicious. I'm telling you, Southern Living and Serena weren't kidding when they said this is such a delicious squash. You can use the filling for pie. I haven't done that yet. I plan on it. This coming year, I plan on growing enough to can them for pie filling. I've made squash patties where I take the roasted squash out. I have some in the freezer that I froze, just waiting to do this. But the other day I roasted one, and I just took that filling with a little bit of egg and flour and panko breadcrumbs, made it really thin, and just gave it a little bit of a fry in some oil. Mr. Blue Jeans and Gigi absolutely loved that. We had that with pork chops. Soup, I made a pumpkin soup, but I used candy squash, so you can substitute that in your pumpkin soup recipe. The sky's the limit. Whatever squash recipe you have, this will do just fine in it. As a matter of fact, we like this squash so much that we are jettisoning the yellow crookneck that we had planted that went over with everybody. And this will be replacing that one so we can grow more of this. And we're keeping the zucchini because there is nobody on the farm that doesn't love a good zucchini bread. So that stays. And in comes the candy squash and out goes the yellow crookneck. So I hope that you have a wonderful time learning about this plant. There are places online that do sell the seeds. Plant it. It's shocking. It's beautiful. It is an amazing thing. Oh, the one other thing is, as it was growing, I wasn't sure when to harvest it because I had never dealt with this kind of variety. Well, let's face it, I haven't really dealt with a lot of things when it comes to the garden, but I've never even seen this in a grocery store. So it gets a little orangey and waxy on the outside, and there's going to be a little green at the top, which is fine. That doesn't indicate anything really. And I wanted to harvest it so bad. Poor Serena, I kept sending her pictures. Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Finally, I learned when it's ready. So I hope you try this candy squash in your garden if you have a chance to, and leave a comment or a picture or anything if you've already grown these, if you like them. I'd love to hear about it. So this is Nikki D from Five Dog Farm and our candy squash. We'll talk to you soon.